Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Third Eye Awakening. Today, I have Kendra, who is a member of the Soul Space group, because Soul Space is the best and the members are the best, so come join. And she's generously offering her time and her experiences to just tell us about like her spiritual awakening journey and what that has been like and what it's like right now. So hi, Kendra, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So just to start off, I would like to let you define for yourself what spiritual awakening means to you.
Okay. So the way it's feeling to me, the way the whole process feels is like unlocking the rest of my consciousness, like the rest of my brain. Like up until this point, I've only been using a portion of what's available. And now my eyes are just open to what else is already inside of me.
I love that answer. That's a unique one that I haven't heard so far, but I feel like right as you started saying it, I was like, oh yes. So much of it is like just discovering like how much more there is in there within ourselves. Love it. Okay, so will you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of, a little bit of your background and the spiritual awakening sort of unfolding that you've had so far?
Yeah. So I guess if I was to go kind of all the way back to my childhood, I grew up, my childhood was very happy, very normal. Grew up with my parents and my sister, and my parents we never really talked too much about what their personal beliefs were necessarily, and they kind of left it open to us to kind of grow into whatever we wanted to believe. But one thing was that it was really important to my grandma, to my dad's mom, that we went to church with her when we were little, and she's Presbyterian. So my sister and me and my cousin used to go every week with her to Sunday school and to service. And I just found it really hard to connect. I think for me, being that young too, and it not really being something we talked about back home, but the Presbyterian church uses like the King James version of the Bible.
Okay.
And it always sounded like a foreign language to me. Like it didn't even sound like they were speaking English.
Right.
And so I just honestly, I didn't understand anything that was being said. So I never really connected with it. And then I just recently kind of had a recovered memory of being with my dad and driving, and I can remember the specific part of town we were in. I don't remember why this came up, but I remember saying to him that I didn't believe in God and that I didn't believe anything that they were telling us at church, and I didn't think God existed. And he just kind of sat there, and I remember him like nodding his head and then being like, well, like that, if that's how you feel, that's totally okay. He's like, but I don't think we should tell your grandma that. And I think you should keep going to church with her because it's important to her. And I agreed to that and continued. I can't even really remember when we stopped doing that. I think it was probably when my sister and cousin got to high school, because then they were busy enough that it was an excuse for us not to have to go anymore. But I kind of kept that, like I kind of through high school even would have classified myself as an atheist, and didn't have any connections, didn't feel anything more than just my physical life, I guess. And then when I was a freshman in college, a lot of things happened really quickly in a few months there, but I ended up meeting a guy through a mutual friend of ours, and he was Christian and grew up in a Christian home. And then we kind of started dating, and like he would talk about Jesus and God to me, and I was always like, oh, that's nice for you, but I don't really believe that type of thing. And that was like, okay, we were just kind of exploring what it would be like to be in a relationship if we both weren't
Mm.
on that same page, I guess, because going to church and reading his Bible and everything was really important to him. And then kind of I just within a couple of months of meeting him and starting to have some of those conversations with him, one of my closest childhood friends ended up committing suicide. And I really, that was the first time that it felt personal to me, I guess, like that there's more to this life. But I didn't know what that was. And I was really kind of searching, I guess, at that point. And then having this guy in my life that's Christian, he really inserted himself into that and, like told me that I should, pray and do that. And so then I did that. And I guess, and then after, like, I really felt Jesus come into my life. I guess I really had kind of what a lot of Christians talk about, those moments of like accepting Jesus and being saved and everything that they say. Like I did have my own experience with that, with Jesus praying in my room. And so then from there, then I kind of decided I was full in Christian too, and started going to church with him. We ended up getting married even just a couple months after that. It was like, it all happened so fast. But I still really struggled, and I still really struggled with my friend because like, so now my husband was telling me that because my friend wasn't saved, he grew up Catholic and he wasn't a born again Christian, that he was in hell and that I would never see him again. And then at his funeral, since he was Catholic, the priest there talked about how he was baptized as a baby, so he was in heaven, and that's like the one way to get to heaven. And so then I was like, oh, so I kept going back and forth. I'm like, either I'm going to heaven and he's going to be in hell, or he's in hell. Like it was going to be one or the other, and I was never going to get to see him again or like have him part of my life again. And it just didn't feel right, because those were some of the moments where like I really felt him, but I felt like everybody around me was telling me that wasn't happening, like kind of. And so I kind of then, was like having those thoughts of like, I'm crazy and it's not real and like whatever. And just really trying to figure out, like coming to terms with it on my own. And then a couple more years down the road, I ended up meeting this friend, and her dad was a pastor. And he had like a totally different view though than like my husband and his family and the church we were going to did. And he was a lot more open about, like, it just didn't have to be so black and white. Like it wasn't like, there was just a lot of room for us to be human and like all of these other things. And he validated like the experiences that I had and like my connection that I was growing with Jesus and God, but that I guess it almost was like my permission that I needed to leave the situation I was in, because not only was the like being a Christian in the religion a huge part of it, but it was also just not a healthy relationship. But it was always covered by that he was doing right because he's a Christian, he's the man of the house, like God gave him the authority to treat me the way he did, and kind of those things. And so at that point was when I just decided that for myself and for like the path I was on, that I needed to separate from that. And so separate from him. And then at the same time, I felt like separating from the church and trying to come back to what my own beliefs were and like what my own experiences and what other things are out there. Because so now at this point, it was like I had the Presbyterian church and this one Christian church that was like really all I was taking in. And just so now it's been a few years since that's happened, and I've just felt really lost those years because I had no idea like where to go or what to do. And then some of the like experiences and things I was feeling, I was still just doubting myself. Really within probably the last 6 months or so, I am a social worker at an agency here, and we hired a new gal. And right after she started, she was also working on the side to get her Reiki level trainings. And hearing her talk about that and talk about the universe and talk about everything, it just like all of a sudden clicked. And like I said, like I just felt like my brain just like unlocked, and I was like, oh, like that connection I have to Jesus and God is real, but it's more than I ever thought it was. And like I had like I don't know, it just has like completely just like changed, I guess, and opened up this whole world that's always felt so like constrictive.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, it's just been, and every day I just feel like more and more and more like growth and connection and everything.
And so it's really mostly been in the last 6 months that you've kind of like been exploring the concept of spirituality or things beyond, our physical experience that are outside of the definitions of created by the churches you've known.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of that's come from her, but then a lot of it has come, I've like, that's where I just started kind of just wanting to soak in every bit of information I could find and like every like resource available to me. I'm just like trying like constant day and night, just trying to, because I'm just like so excited now. Like I finally, like it all finally makes sense. It all finally feels right, when up until this point, there's always been like something inside of me that just didn't feel like, it just wasn't completely aligned, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I just find that so fascinating just because of to me, I like one of the reasons I'm so interested in this is because I grew up, I was raised Christian, but it was really laid back. So I didn't really ever feel any like pressure around it. Still had my moments where I was like, I'm going to hell, and I would like cry myself to sleep, but they were very, very like isolated. And it was just me, having a mini existential crisis at the time. And then I guess like as I got older, or somewhere in my older childhood, the concept of like you said, like this being the only path to salvation just was the thing that I couldn't reconcile. I just absolutely couldn't reconcile it. I always felt really close to Native North American belief systems. I think I have other life connections with it. And I was like, I don't know, I just felt like they can't go to heaven because they never even heard, like all the ones before the Jesuits came over. And I think the Jesuits are like, this a whole other topic. But anyway, like the Jesuits haven't come over yet and like tortured them into converting. And so all of those people went to hell, no matter what kind of life they lived or what kind of like what they did with themselves. Like I couldn't reconcile that. So I kind of had to leave that behind. But this year with the really, to me, it seems like the polarization between good and evil, I guess, if you're going to use very summarizing words, that seems so overt that it really reconnected me to Christ consciousness, which had already been floating around in my brain for some years. And I met so many people through Akashic readings who have Christ consciousness codes that they're meant to represent here on earth. And what I think I understand through the Akasha is that, the return of Christ that people talk about is actually Christ consciousness en masse. A bunch of people carrying a piece of the code that just elevates the consciousness of humanity and like kind of like creates a bigger pathway to like, I don't know, choosing the non-sins. Like I don't even all those words feel so weird and judgy. It's really weird. But so I'm so interested in the conversations around, because similarly, like it was even just last week that I had one of those moments you were talking about where I really felt resonance with that consciousness and like what, I believe the figure that we call Jesus represents and represented, and it's so different from the church, and it's so different from the rigid ways that it's been kind of like, I don't know, kind of co-opted and interpreted. And like it's super interesting to hear about your experience when you were sort of coming from a place of not even necessarily like it was kind of for a boy kind of, right? And you had this like really upsetting loss that you had to try and reconcile. And so as you were kind of coming out of that relationship and out of that church and that path, did your atheism ever sort of come back in, or was that experience that you had that kind of led you to open up to the church a big game changer for you?
It was totally a game changer. I never went back to like atheist thoughts because I like the one thing was like, I knew I had those moments with Jesus, like, and then I finally understood God, and like kind of, you know, now I still use the word God, but kind of the idea of like the universe, and like I and I had that understanding then, and I knew that that was real. And like, even if some of the things that the church said or did I didn't agree with, like those moments were real to me, and I took that with me. But I had a hard time then knowing what to do with that, I guess, because I really didn't want to be connected to the church anymore, and some of those like ritualistic things or like that type of thinking, but I wanted to have that relationship with Jesus still. So that's kind of what I just decided to do over the past few years, is I still connect with that energy and with like, you know, the idea of God and stuff, but I didn't, I guess. So I don't know. During that period, I guess I probably would have called myself like agonistic or something, where it was like I knew there was something more, but I just didn't know how to define it. And now I finally feel like I'm starting to learn those words and learn kind of exactly where I want that to go and exactly how like that looks now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. Just being like developing that relationship without necessarily like having to put a label on it or function within the rule structure of a bunch of people that decide to organize themselves around it. Um,
Yeah.
and so when you were younger and you know, like just the way that you were interfacing with life and you were like, I don't believe in anything. Did you, like when you were little, do you remember ever having any sense of anything else being there, or did you really really feel like there was just nothing at all, or was it more like in response to, you know, going to church with your grandma and really not connecting with any of the messages as they were relayed there?
I mean, I remember having a lot of moments throughout my childhood and even up until just recently, where it would happen when I was like laying in bed, falling asleep, or driving in the car or something. And I would just get this thought of like, what is life? What is this? What are we doing here? Like this, and starting from when I was really young, probably before I even told my dad that I didn't believe in God. See, now looking back on it, it's almost like I feel like the universe was trying to, then when I was like in that space, it was trying to tell me and it was trying to show me, but then I was overwhelmed by what was like coming through, and it didn't make sense and it didn't line up with anything anybody else had ever said to me. So I would just shut it down and I'd be like, I'm not going to think about that. And I would make myself go to like at my happy place, like on the beach. And I'm like, I'm not going to think about the world. I'm a human and I'm just going to get through this. And like I'll forget that I had these thoughts by tomorrow and I can just move on with my life. So now it's just funny because I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just so interesting that that it's all, I mean, it just does make sense that it's all part of like this bigger plan, and kind of just for my own life and maybe from whatever my past lives were, just it had to happen in this way for me and for a lot of reasons. But because I kept saying, and I kept saying out loud, I'm atheist, I'm atheist, I'm atheist, like it was almost like I needed a bridge between that and where I am now. And that's what the Christianity served for me in that time, because I don't know that I ever could have went all the way from where I was to all the way where I am now without having some of those other things happen in between, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And what a really traumatic, devastating loss to have your friend take his own life. And what a really like difficult thing to navigate, to then receive mixed messages, for one thing, from like the same faith but different denominations. But
Yeah.
to hear your husband at the time just, you know, not, and that was his belief based on the religion he was part of, but to hear him say that like your friend had gone to hell is just such a, it's such a really hard thing to hear when you're already raw, and taken by surprise too, right? Like to
Yeah.
somebody who's really young, and to lose them in such a way when you weren't expecting is really really difficult.
It was just hard, but at that time it was almost like I was just so broken and so lost at that time that I almost just like let what let myself be blinded, I guess, kind of, and just like that's how I just ended up following blindly because it was just the only thing there for me to grasp at. Like without that, I felt like I had no hope and no purpose and no nothing. And so it was like I needed to just grab on to that, to whatever it was that he was offering. And like kind of he was saying, like it's too bad he went to hell, but like you don't have to. You can go to heaven, but you have to do all these things in order to get there. And so it was like, well, I guess this is what I'm going to do then. I guess I have no other choice but to do this. And it is hard, but I think I've like reconciled it enough by now to, I don't know. I guess I'm just thankful that I was able to kind of have all of the other moments to get out of that way of thinking, because I always rejected that, but I still went along with it, I guess. I was still a part of it. And now I'm just happy. I'm thankful that I was like able to have the opportunity to leave that
Mm-hmm.
and be here now.
Totally. And so now where you are in your path, what are the things that are kind of interesting to you? Like, where is your spiritual awakening unfolding, taking you?
I mean, I am really interested then, I guess, in just expanding on like what my gifts are, because that was the other thing is like in being Christian, they talk about some of the gifts that are anointed there. And I never connected with any of those as being my gifts. And then I just kind of internalized that as like, oh, I don't have any. But like now it's like I kind of coming to terms with what those are and then how I can use them in order to just continue to just live out like